Let me introduce our guest, Rohin Shah, who is leading the team at Google DeepMind that works on AGI Safety and Alignment. Considering the new developments in AI, I think it's a very important topic to discuss, and I really appreciate, Rohin, that you found the time to join us and share what you guys are working on.
Thanks for having me, Sophia. It's great to be here. This is just going to be a quick presentation on a paper we published maybe a month ago on an approach to AGI safety and security. It's a very long paper. It's, I think, over 100 pages, even if you exclude the references. But there is a 10-page extended abstract, which is much more readable. But even so, it's a lot of content. I'm only going to really get to give a brief overview of it. Excited to talk about it with people afterwards during the Q&A. Let me start with the basic context and scope behind the paper. And this is really the possibility of severe harm from very powerful AI systems, more powerful than the ones that we have today. Specifically, when we say severe harm, I think we define it in the paper of things that could impact humanity as a whole. So really, it is quite a high bar considering in this paper. And the reason for that is that governance and planning and deciding what to do about these risks looks very different for these kinds. For any sort of risk that you want to make extremely rare, such that it plausibly never happens. Typical risks, such as even fatal ones, like the risk of car accidents, the approach that society would take is to observe the risk happening in practice, and then once you know what's going wrong and have some traction on the problem and have some examples which you can study, then you decide what kinds of mitigations you should put in place. And this helps prevent the problem where you without seeing any examples, you're like, well, maybe it works this way, and put in mitigations that end up being not very important and just counterproductive and making it hard to gain the benefits of the technology. Unfortunately, that's not something you can do for these extremely severe risks. The example I like is from the history of the making of the atomic bomb, where the Manhattan Project at one point was worried that the nuclear reactions they were using might set the atmosphere on fire. And obviously for something like that, you can't just, wait for the atmosphere to be set on fire and then figure out how to not set the atmosphere on fire. Instead, they had to do some theory and some calculations to try and figure out what the likelihood of that was happening before they ever went forward with that, with the nuclear reactions. It's another question of how well they did, but in fact, in the end, the atmosphere was not set on fire, so it's a good job to them. We think that there are some risks that have a sort of similar flavor where you need to prepare for them in advance, and that's the purpose of this paper is to start actually preparing for them in advance. So what areas would this be? We identified 4 broad groups of these severe risks. They're really these are groups, not really very specific risk areas. The reason for that is we wanted to group together different concrete threat models, so that have very similar approaches to mitigations, because then we can try to address each group as a whole. So the first area is misuse. So this is where the user instructs the AI system to cause harm. Typical things you might think of in this category are things like cyber offense or weapons of mass destruction or so on. It seems quite likely that AIs aren't going to go around inventing new weapons of mass destruction at the moment. They're definitely not powerful enough for that, but it might be something that could happen in the future. And something a little bit more closer on the horizon is taking existing knowledge about how to do significant harm like this that's not widespread among people but does exist, and then democratizing access to that, making it easier for for bad actors to be able to do this when they couldn't previously. The next area is misalignment. So while in misuse, in some sense, the user of the AI system is the adversary, in misalignment, it's the AI system itself that's the adversary. The broad category of misalignment is just when the AI system takes actions that the developer very clearly didn't intend for the AI system to do, and the AI system knew that that was happening. It wasn't just it was making a mistake. The broad category certainly includes things that aren't severe risks, but these could get to the point of being severe harms if the models are powerful enough to actually take over and essentially execute a coup over humanity. Again, models are nowhere close to this. AI systems are nowhere close to this point today. But if AI progress continues to progress as fast as it has been, maybe it could happen in the not too distant future. The third category is mistakes. So this is, here again, if you had to blame someone, it would be the AI system. But unlike in the misalignment case, in this case, the AI system doesn't realize that the actions it's taking are causing severe harm. This area, I think, is like not actually that plausible. The main reason being like we try to make our systems and society robust to mistakes for severe harm, just because humans can also make mistakes, and it would be bad if those could have such big bad consequences. And so if we apply sort of similar safety engineering principles to our AI systems, which I think we will do by default, probably we can avoid the risk of severe harm from mistakes. Though of course, smaller harms from mistakes are very plausible. And then finally, there is this category of structural risks. There's no single agent that is that is aiming to cause harm, but nonetheless, the interaction across society of the various different humans and AI systems together ends up causing problems. There are many different proposed ways that this could happen, and there isn't really a single set of mitigations that makes sense for all of them. So this is a bit more of a catch-all category and tends to require fairly bespoke approaches to each one. And so this one is actually out of the scope of our paper, but we thought it was important to mention because it is something to be aware of. Similarly, mistakes is out of scope of the paper, mostly because we think it's not as likely or as urgent as the other two categories. Let's dive a bit more into the actual mitigation approaches that we would have for misuse and misalignment. And I'll start with misuse. I won't go into too much depth here since we don't have a very long presentation. Here's a broad overview of the misuse approach. And this is put into practice already at several frontier AI companies. So at Google DeepMind, where I work, this is in the Frontier Safety Framework. The main thing that has gotten the most attention so far is these dangerous capability evaluations in the middle. These are essentially evaluations of our AI systems to see whether they are even capable of being misused for severe harm, even if if we don't take any mitigations whatsoever, with the idea that until we get past until the models are passing these evaluations, we don't need to put in any mitigations because the mitigations will generally make the models a little bit less useful, though of course we try to limit that. So this is something that many frontier companies are doing right now, evaluating for ability to assist with developing weapons or cyber offense and things like that. Once models actually do become capable of this sort of dangerous stuff, then we would have both a set of mitigations that affect the model itself. So that's in the training box. So you can do safety training and capability suppression so that the model doesn't exhibit these dangerous capabilities in practice. And then there are some more outside the model, but inside the AI system overall mitigations, which we would call deployment mitigations. So that's in the deployment box. And the two I would highlight are monitoring, where you just look at the inputs and the outputs that the AI system is getting and producing and see is this does this seem like it is either a prompt from the user that could that is trying to cause misuse of the model, and is the output actually giving the information that the user requested, and if so, just blocking that and not sending that. So that would be monitoring, and that would happen at the level of an individual conversation with a chatbot or an LLM. Access restrictions, on the other hand, happen more at the account level, which would be if you see a sufficient pattern of this user is just constantly trying to get around the mitigations, trying to jailbreak the model, and so on in order to get answers to these harmful queries. Then you might ban that account entirely so that they don't get to continue figuring out how to break your mitigations. These are, so far I've just been describing the mitigations that are that apply if you have a model internally, there's an API, someone externally is trying to use the API to get access to dangerous capabilities. A completely different threat model for misuse would be if the attacker just steals the model entirely and then removes all of the mitigations themselves. And so for that, we would want to invest in security to ensure that that cannot happen. And then finally, there's red teaming of all of these mitigations to understand how strong they are, what it would take to defeat them, where the weak points are so that they can be improved, and so on. So that's misuse. First, I think I want to tell you a sort of parable of misalignment, inspired by a tale that may or may not have happened in reality. It's not totally clear. There was a town, had a cobra, a problem with cobras, sorry, not just a single cobra. There were just too many cobras. And so the Sultana instituted a reward for every dead cobra that the people brought in. And maybe unsurprisingly, the people figured out the flaw in the system. They started to breed cobras so that they could kill them and then collect the reward. So as a result, the cobra problem wasn't getting any better. Eventually, the Sultana, canceled the reward because it wasn't helping. And then everyone just released all of the cobras they had bred into the wild, and the problem was even worse than when it had started. So what's the lesson here? I would say that the key problem is that the Sultana didn't know as much as the people who were bringing in the cobras. And in particular, she didn't know whether the cobras were hunted in the wild or bred in captivity. If she could somehow distinguish between these two situations, then the solution would be trivial. She just needs to provide rewards for cobras that were hunted in the wild and not provide a reward for the ones that were bred in captivity. And so if we take this insight and generalize it for artificial intelligence, that gives us the principle of informed oversight, which says that you can mitigate misalignment if, for every output that the AI system is producing, you get to understand all of the reasons underlying why the AI produced that output. And so intuitively, this just means that the AI system can't deliberately cause any harm because, if it's deliberately causing harm, then the AI system knows that it's causing harm. And so by informed oversight, the overseer would also know that this is causing harm. And then they can just say no, please don't do that, or take some sort of corrective action. This is much more of a principle than a mitigation. So now there's a question of what mitigations do you actually do to try to get closer to this sort of North Star in practice. I don't think we're ever going to literally hit it, but we can get closer to it. We've got a few components for that. So first is amplified oversight. Basically, once an AI system has superhuman capabilities, we need to ensure that the human overseers can still provide feedback as though they understand all of the reasons that the AI produced its output. So often over here, we think about how we can try to elicit the knowledge or the information that the AI system itself has, and try to make that accessible to the human so that they can provide good oversight. The second component is how to scale this oversight to all of the AI's outputs rather than just a single one as an amplified oversight, so that we are avoiding there being any gaps that the AI could exploit. You can't just run amplified oversight on everything because amplified oversight tends to be very expensive. You can only run that on a few inputs, not the billions or trillions of inputs that AI systems use at deployment. So there are two different strategies here. The first one is to make the AI system robust by training it across a wide variety of possible situations that might come up, so that even in new situations at deployment time, it continues to do the right thing. And then the second option is to simply monitor every output from the AI system after it is deployed, not using amplified oversight, but using something cheaper. And so then a major challenge in this case is how to scale these, quite expensive techniques from amplified oversight to these billions of inputs that you'll see at deployment. And for this, you'll often try to imagine hierarchical monitoring, where you start with some cheap, not very good monitor that can flag when it's uncertain or when things are bad, and then you escalate only a small fraction of the ones that were flagged to a more expensive monitor and build up layers like this. So in principle, these three components together could be sufficient to achieve informed oversight. But in practice, we're not going to be perfect at this stuff. And so we want to have additional layers of defenses. And the main one that I would name here is security. This is also related to AI control, if people happen to be familiar with that. And these sorts of mitigations are trying to mitigate the impact even if we do get misaligned AI systems, whereas the previous three, well, at least amplified oversight and robust training, are trying to make it so that you don't get misaligned AI in the first place. So those are the main components. Besides those core ingredients, there are several other research areas or enablers that also are very helpful to invest in. So interpretability is an area where you just try to understand how the AI system is producing its outputs. There are just many, many applications of this. As a general rule, if you better understand the systems that you are building, that helps you control and align them. I could go into many more concrete examples of how interpretability could help if we were good enough at it. I think the intuitive case is just understanding the things you're building is usually pretty helpful. For alignment stress tests, these will alignment stress tests are asking the question of given the mitigations that we've put in place, have we really achieved the principle of informed oversight, or is it still possible that problems could arise? So here you would have a red team try to actively create some sort of environment or environment in which if you apply your training techniques, that's not sufficient to prevent problems from arising. And then finally, there's safer design patterns. And so this is more figuring out how we can build AI capabilities in a way that makes it easier to achieve safety and alignment. And I'll go into a few examples of that right now. So the first one is just that when we develop the model specs for our AI systems, we emphasize properties that can help enable safety and alignment, with the most obvious example being just checking in with the user before taking any consequential actions. This is becoming more and more important as we start entering the era of AI agents rather than just AI chatbots. Continuing to use training techniques that ensure that the model continues to think out loud, basically in English that we can easily understand. There are other ways that AI could be built that would give up on this property, which would make it a lot harder to understand what the AI system is doing. So trying to ensure that we can stay in the very nice current regime that we have, where the AI systems just say all of their thoughts out loud in English that we can read. That would be pretty great to keep that property. And then finally, there are different kinds of training techniques that can try and control which parts of the problem solving are being done by the AI system versus the humans. So ideally, you would use AI systems to solve the sort of short, well-scoped, bounded problems, and then have humans thinking about how do you extend this to longer horizons and plan over longer timescales. And this one, we just recently published a paper, I think in January of this year, on myopic optimization with non-myopic approval that shows one recipe for how you could achieve this. Though unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into how exactly it works. It's quite cool, I think.